Well, welcome to this webinar on applying user research, usability testing, and visual design techniques to a printed publication, in this case targeted at teenagers. Let me just turn on my video camera for a minute as we get started. All right, there we go. So you can see who's talking to you for this. I want to apologize to your chapter and to Cindy for not being able to do the Tuesday session from this past week, but my aunt passed away last Saturday, and so things were a bit up in the air, and I was traveling for that. But I'm happy to do this recording for your chapter. Hopefully you'll get some good information out of it. And if it looks like I'm crying right now, it has nothing to do with the motion, but the fact that I put the wrong solution into my eye with my contacts right before I was doing this, and so that's what that's all about. I'm Joe Walensky from Writers UA, and this talk is related to some new techniques that I've been doing. I don't know if it's new, but some things I've been doing over the last few years related to usability testing of documentation, in this case specifically for the organization that puts on the ACT tests for tens of thousands of high school, sophomore, juniors, and seniors every year throughout the United States and in other parts of the world. Now I'm not going to leave the video on this whole time, so let me just turn that off. So I think that's just a distraction. And before we get into the balance of the program, I do want to thank ADOBE for sponsoring this and making it possible by helping to support my time to prepare and put on these presentations. And might want to take a look at their latest set of products, and again I thank them for their support. Now I mentioned this project was related to the ACT testing service. I was working as a subcontractor for an organization called Blink, which specializes in user research. They're in the Seattle area, and I do special projects with them. And the ACT came to Blink because they had a number of print publications that they had some suspicions weren't being actively used by the students that they were meant for. There were several of these publications, but the one I'm talking about here was called Using Your ACT Results, and it was a publication that students would receive along with their test results. And so here's a look at that. It was a pamphlet-sized document, and it was 16 pages long, and it essentially had information that would enhance or supplement what the students found in their score report. So every student would receive a score report, whether they chose to get that information online or not. They would get this material in the mail as a printed publication. And you can kind of take a look at the information that's there. It covers quite a lot of ground, and as I mentioned, it's 16 pages in length. Now, at the point the STC or the ACT came to Blink with the project, they just had suspicions about this. So one of the things that Blink is good at doing is then actually doing user research to find out what exactly is going on. And as part of that research, we did, or I did, in-person interviews with students in 3 different cities from 5 or 6 different schools, varying degrees in terms of their age, where they were in school, and I think the only common thread besides them being a student was that they had taken the test. Now, one of the things that was a part of these interviews was to record those interviews, both as a record of what happened that we could look on later, but also to possibly uh, help to show the stakeholders at the ACT what the students felt about the various publications. And so what I want to show you now is a video, a compilation. There's of all the students that we interviewed, there are probably 20-some hours worth of recorded interviews. This is just a very small snippet of that. I think it's just over about 1.5 minutes in length. And this is just the students talking to me about their experiences with that printed publication that I showed you. I'm going to stop talking so that I can adjust the microphone so you'd be able to hear the audio.
I don't think it has to be like a booklet this long. Like, it has a lot of information, and a lot of it's good information, but I mean, if it's just to figure out how the test is, I think it could come with like a sheet or maybe like a mini booklet.
I probably wouldn't have opened it. I would have just, looked at it like, what is this? Like, it's just like a brochure thing that they just give you, like, for us to like sign up for something or something. I wouldn't have looked at it.
And I just took college readiness as maybe not exactly like a preparation, but whether or not they would look at it and think that's a bad score.
There could have been something like this because everything at the ACT looks like this, so I could just be familiar with how it looks. But if I did, I never looked at it.
I'd probably skim through it. I mean, I wouldn't get it there and sit there for 20 minutes reading it just because it seems like something that's not very fun to read.
All right. Well, one of the things that struck me from that when I did those interviews was, just how different all of these people were in terms of their personalities and their interests about the world around them, and then specifically the test, and then more specifically this document. And the videos really highlighted who these people were, and that their ideas about what was important to them were probably very different from the people that had been putting the publication together in the first place. Essentially, after putting together the information from the various interviews, we had some findings that we presented to them, to the ACT through Blink, and you can see that on the slide here. The main two findings were, first of all, that these students were very put off by the text-intensive design of the publication. They didn't find it interesting or engaging at all. Most of the students had no recollection at all of even seeing that piece of information, even though they most certainly probably received it. But even if it had been in front of them, it was obviously something that presented no interest to them. However, the second finding was that when we had the students talk to us about, we had the students look at the publication, go through it, scan through it, and look for information that they thought might be interesting. And all the students found information that they thought would have been helpful to them after taking the test if they'd known it was in that booklet, if the booklet had been engaging enough for them to pick up and look through with any type of care. And so subsequent to that, we replaced much of the text with infographics. I'll talk more about those in a minute. I adjusted the way that things were laid out to be more of a narrative that was based on how a student might be interested in consuming that information, and then also more contemporary design for that publication as well. I've kind of talked through these aspects already, so let me just give some more specifics about what we found through those interviews. Yeah, I mentioned the part about the students not remembering that booklet was something that had come to them. There's very specific comments about the layout of the information as well, especially that the dense text what wasn't of interest to them at all. The publication also used very low quality newsprint that was done primarily for apparently for cost reduction, but it just made the entire publication look like maybe just about the cheapest form of advertising. And so one of the things that we recommended to the ACT was that things had to be adjusted there in terms of working with the text, the layout, and how the book was produced. And then on that second part that I mentioned about the students finding information that they had interest in, when they found those items, they were really sincere that they wish they would have had that information, and several of them mentioned that would have helped them with certain aspects subsequent to having taken the test. Just so you can kind of see what the data looked like for these 20 students. So going across in the columns from the left to right are the initials of the students, and then the asterisks indicate sections of the publication that they found that they thought would have been of interest to them. Now, there were a few issues that many of the students felt were important that they wish they would have found, and so from that helped me position information to know which things should go toward the beginning of that publication and help start to craft that narrative. But this also brings out a big issue for any type of print documentation, which is that not everything can be first, unlike web documentation with links. With print, something's going to be in the front, something's going to be in the middle, and some things are going to be in the back. Not everything is going to be able to be in front. So with print, you do have to still make some very important choices about what goes there. I think a lot of times those choices reflect our decisions as authors without taking into account or doing any type of research of what that should be for the students. And then, as you can see, there were some items that the students had no interest in at all, and so we factored that into what we did. One of the main aspects that I got involved with was working with the text and the images that were there, reducing the text significantly, increasing the use of the images and the quality and the design of the images. So I mentioned this was a 16-page booklet. I ended up stripping out most of the text that was in there, and this kind of created an interesting situation in terms of an interpersonal dynamic, because the stakeholders were the people that have been putting this information together, and a lot of different departments contributed information that they felt was very important to this booklet. And in situations like that, it can be hard for people to let go of the information that they think is vitally important. Well, one of the things that we did with that 20 hours of interviews was put together a short video, longer than the one that I showed you, but shorter than the raw footage, to give to the stakeholders. And when they saw the students commenting about this publication, that changed the entire way that further discussions went. It was obvious that something needed to happen with this publication. And by the way, they're printing about 4 million copies of this publication every year, and so there's a significant cost involved in printing this publication. And when you start thinking of the relatively low percentage of students that may be using the publication, is obviously that there's probably a big waste and cost going on there. So just to show a little bit of where we went in terms of the visuals, I decided to go with some infographics that would take the place of much of the text, and also go with a format that would lend itself to showing the information more in a tabloid form by switching from a portrait to a landscape orientation. So when you open the booklet up, the spine would be in the middle, and you would see a page on the top and the bottom, which then would give you a lot more real estate to present the message. And the illustrations that I did were, I did the original sketches, and then Adam Faja, who is one of the designers at Blink, did the actual rendering of the graphics. And we tried to make those graphics a bit more descriptive than what you might normally have. I feel that many of the students would be able to get the information that they needed from the graphics without actually reading the accompanying information. So that was one of my goals, is that they could scan for that, and they would have just a little bit better information than they had than not looking at it at all. Let me just see here. Oh, okay. And so here is the publication that we ended up with. And so one other aspect was applying a more contemporary design, just make it a little bit more interesting and engaging. And with this PDF, I can't really show the landscape mode, but essentially this page, when you open it up, this page would be on the top of the fold, and this would be on the lower section of the fold. And the same thing for other parts of the documentation. Now, we ended up with 8 pages versus 16 pages, which means that a lot of information had to go away. And so that was really just, that wasn't as much about technical communication as about having good reasons to present to the stakeholders as to what should be in this publication and what really didn't have a place there. Now, one of the side effects of going from 16 pages to 8 pages was you had, in real terms, a 50% reduction in cost. So the materials were reduced in half, the printing costs were reduced in half, the mailing costs were reduced in half, the amount of handling was reduced in half, and we did some back of the napkin calculations and found that just the savings and costs on production probably paid for a good chunk of the cost of the engagement for ACT with Blink in the first place. So that kind of brings me to the end of this little tour of this publication. And at this point, oh, and I want to mention that I presented this as a paper at the annual SIGDOC conference, and that paper is available at that link there, and I'll make sure that Cindy gets these slides so that you have that information available, and it kind of looks like that. and essentially goes through all the details of the study with recommendations and things like that. But I really want to use this session as an opportunity to encourage everyone to get involved in testing our documentation. I mainly work in the software world, and for at least 2 decades, it's been, pretty much that if you don't test your software before it goes to users, you're going to be missing out on a lot of potential issues and opportunities to be able to service your customers. However, in all the years that I've worked in the documentation field, I've seen very few situations where people are aggressively testing their documentation against users. And whenever I've done it, I've found significant problems in my documentation. I think it's just cultural, and that culture eliminates us having the resources from doing that. But I think that if everybody tested their documentation, they'd find that there would probably need to be a lot of adjustments in how we think about putting that documentation together, how we design it, how we write it. Just in terms of the volume of content, I think that would put up a lot of alarm bells. Personally, I think just talking really broadly, that of the documentation that I see both in the software world and traditional forms, that I think word counts could be reduced in half without losing any meaning if good authorship still went into the content. So that's just kind of my soapbox related to that, but I encourage you to try and get involved in usability testing of your content as much as possible. I've been fortunate to be able to teach a class on usability testing for TechCom people at Bellevue College. So they've been progressive about adding a class for that to the Technical Communication Certificate program. Hopefully that'll be something that we start to see in other parts of the country and the world. Just before we close, I did want to mention the conference that we have coming up in Newport, Rhode Island. And so this is our Writers UA East event, and if you're not on the East Coast, I think it's a great opportunity to be able to check out some really interesting sessions at a very affordable price. In fact, with the promo code STC, that's good for an additional $100 off the $795 price. So for $695, you can have a great time networking and learning about things in Newport, Rhode Island, which is a really fun city. So I think we're going to have a good time there. We're going to do some social networking activities on the Sunday, which is the 27th, before we get into the educational information on the 28th and the 29th. ADOBE is also a sponsor of that event. So please consider that, or at least tell your friends about it and pass the word along. And then I also include some links to content that I'm always writing and updating on my website, which includes a resource directory, my blog, and I try to list courses and presentations like this one. Most of them are free. So that being said, thank you very much for listening into this presentation, and I hope I'll be able to see you at a live event at some point. Thank you very much.